Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to the Dóchas webinar for Charity Trustees Week. I'm delighted to have you all here this morning to discuss this very important topic around recruiting trustees from the Global South to your board. Charity Trustees Week will run all week, and there's a whole series of events that you can see online. And I think really as Dóchas, what we wanted to focus on was where we, I suppose, what we can do and how we can support members in their efforts to recruit members from the Global South onto their board. Just in terms of some housekeeping, so I would ask that everybody keeps their microphones off. We have three speakers who will speak, and I'll be handing over to them to, I suppose, to give their perspective. But I will be opening it up then to questions, comments as well, and anything else that you would like to add to the conversation. So please feel free to either put questions or comments in the chat, or else there'll be an opportunity to put up your hand at the end and have a conversation. And I think it's important. We have a really good lineup of speakers here. And it'd be great to have a bit of a discussion on how we can, move this forward really as a sector, and what are some of the practical considerations that we can take on board going forward. So as many of you know, there is a very much a strong push within the international development and humanitarian sector to encourage people from the Global South onto their boards. I think this is the reasons really are many, but I think just to surmise, I think one is that for all nonprofit boards, I think there is very much an importance on having and recruiting trustees with lived experience onto their board. So really ensuring that you're bringing the perspective of those you are assisting or supporting into the at the highest level of the decision making within an international NGO or a domestic NGO. And then I think you can couple that with the other dimension, which is really around, the shift in power and really looking at how we want to transform the international development and humanitarian sector to ensure that local voices are at the forefront, and how we can actually really integrate that into the different power structures that exist within international NGOs as well. So I'd like just to introduce the panel firstly. So I'm delighted to have three different speakers here today. So firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Melissa Bosch. So Melissa is a TROCRA board member, but also chair of the Organisation and Human Rights Committee in TROCRA. And as her day job, she is the EY, Ernst & Young Associate Director and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Country Lead. We also have Jim Clarken, who many of you know, who is the CEO of Oxfam Ireland. And we also have Makena Mwobobia, if I pronounce that correctly, McKenna, who is a board member with ActionAid Ireland, but also comes with significant experience both as a development practitioner, a senior leader in the civil society sector, and has served on many international boards in the past. So we're delighted to have this lineup of speakers. And I think I would like to hand over firstly to start the discussion with Melissa. So Melissa, as chair of TROCRA's Organisation and HR Committee, can you give us an insight into developing equity, diversity and inclusion policy and attracting the right candidates in TROCRA, and particularly some of the challenges and barriers that organisations need to overcome in your experience and from your experience?
Absolutely. I'm so delighted to be here today. So thank you so much for the invitation. This is such an important topic. It's such an important topic because there is a huge opportunity to tap in to the diversity of the Global South, into their knowledge, into their lived experience. But it will take a bit of work. It's not easy. If it was easy, organizations across the world would be doing this without skipping a beat. So there are, of course, a few things that you need to be aware of, and you need to approach with intentionality. Having a really solid structure within the organization when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important. Starting from that solid base of actually, this is our strategy, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is why we're trying to achieve it, means that everyone is pulling in the same direction. This is not something that's happening to them, it's happening with them together, because it's going to build a better future. So when we look at diversifying our boards, it's particularly important to really look at what the purpose that it's serving, the diversity that is bringing, but also unlocking the potential of that diversity. So TROCRA has been on a journey, and I've been on the board now for the last year. I've been with an OHR about 8 months prior to that, so 2 years with TROCRA. And I've seen from the outset the openness to actually move the dial and shift power from what would be considered the HQ in Ireland to actually sharing the power across the global south and having that reflected in the board. So really looking at how we're bringing in those diverse perspectives through active recruitment, through understanding the makeup of our current board and the need to actually build that representation, but through meaningful roles. So it's really that, board members from the global south will bring that global competence, will bring the knowledge and contextual understanding, and improve the decision making. But there needs to be readiness on the existing boards to receive that. So yes, it's been quite a journey. We've looked at various aspects. We've looked at our data. We've also worked through various organizations to attract board members from the global south. And we've seen some really great results. We now have 3 members from the global south on our boards, and we continue to grow that pipeline through our committees as well.
Great. And Melissa, could you just give an insight into some of the specific initiatives that you've seen TROCRA employ over the last couple of years to really encourage that number of additional members onto their board from the global south? So what are some of the practical ways that they're really not only encouraging but ensuring that they're supporting trustees to come on board?
So I was very heartened when I started with TROCRA that actually we did an immersive workshop around diversity, equity, and inclusion to really get the board grounded in what that phrase actually means and what it would mean for board members. So really starting from that learning space, stepping into the discomfort of actually things are going to change, and how do I as a board member need to facilitate that change. So we started foundationally from a learning space, being open to actually develop that understanding and acknowledging that we don't know what we don't know, and growing from there. From those sessions, we actually brought on board a board apprentice from the global south, and that's a really part of developing that pipeline of board members that get access to actually understanding how charities boards operate, but also have the power to contribute their unique perspective. So that was something that I think really has added value We've actually extended our board apprentice for an additional year recently, which has just been fantastic to see. And some of the other things that we've done is actually implemented a organization-wide DE&I strategy and an approach to inclusion, and that also talks to and is reflected in the makeup of the board. Working with organizations like Dóchas and Board Match, Boardroom Africa really helped us focus our intentions around attracting talent. One of the other things that we do is really look at our skill set on our boards and on our committees, to really make sure that when we do attract board members, we look at it in a sustainable pipeline, and we look at it in a future-focused kind of way. So it's really been impactful to see that happen, and we've seen really great results of board members that have come through the pipeline, through the various organizations, through the applications that we've seen, quality applications that we've seen, and we've been able to really manage that process and bring in skill sets that are going to add value. Why I'm talking about skill sets that are going to add value is because often when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we just think about diversity, and we think about Noah's Ark and having two of every kind, and that's our job done. That is not diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is about ensuring that you unlock the potential of the diverse perspectives that you bring in to your board, and having those conversations about power dynamics, about how things work within boards, how inclusive it is, all those little practical things. That's going to make all the difference for whether your board is just a Noah's Ark of two of everything, or actually a thriving, high-performing, impactful board.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Melissa. It's really great to hear kind of some of the very practical initiatives that are taking place, and really how you're trying to cultivate that culture throughout Trócaire, you know, from the board level down, really ensuring that it isn't just it isn't really just a kind of a tick box exercise or a case of saying, okay, we need to make sure the next space is filled by somebody in the global south, but really looking at it from a holistic perspective. I'd like to go now to Jim, because I know, Jim, you've been played a key role really in Oxfam's global governance transformation journey over the last 15 years. And it'd be interesting to hear a bit around that. You know, what are some of the changes that have happened at that kind of macro level, but also how that applied here in Oxfam Ireland, and how you're able to make some of those changes and adjustments that were needed in your own organisation in Oxfam.
Thanks, Jane, and again, thanks for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be here, and delighted to be with this great panel. Oxfam's been on a transformational journey for many years, and the scale and complexity of the organization requires quite a lot of time to get, you know, to deliver on this kind of change. But I suppose just in terms of drivers, before I get to the journey, I mean, it was clear to us for a long time, and I suppose it's been the evolution of the organization for many years, starting from the fact that we almost exclusively work through partners in the first place. So we are, you know, the culture and the way of working of the organization has always been about the local leading from the local, and then the local finds its way to connect with the affiliates, and we're a group of a confederation of independent affiliates. So each organization is independent but works collectively and closely under this Oxfam International umbrella. But in terms of the principles, I mean, delivering on our values and our feminist principles of nothing about us without us, ensuring that that the legitimacy, our legitimacy comes from the work that we do, and the work that we do is carried out by local people in local contexts. So it absolutely makes not just sense, but it's absolutely the right thing to do to ensure that those local voices are at the table. I mean, so you can't have a HQ or particularly a northern based organization determining what's the best thing to do, even from a programmatic perspective in any given context. So it's always been led from the country level. But that was fine. But we still had this very much a north-south disbalance in terms of where the power and the money, if you like, or where the voices at the table were. And I think we need to look in the mirror and challenge ourselves on these things. And, you know, it does come down to those kind of principles. Where is the power? Where is the money? Where are the decisions being made? And so we identified that we were off balance, and that in order to transform to transform our organization, we had to transform ourselves. And so we looked to when I was in the organization first, I think there were 13 affiliates, all northern. We now have 21, and all of the new affiliates have been from the south. So we've introduced it. We have a South African affiliate, we have an Indian affiliate, we have Colombian, we have Mexico, we have Hong Kong / China, and we have probably forgetting one or two. We're continually moving in that direction. So around the table, there's a much more diverse Turkey, which has been a really important southern member in recent years, and we've been changing our own narrative around that table and where those key decisions are being made. So they're not being, you know, it isn't a case of the Global South feeding into decisions, it's the Global South making decisions. We also determined that because of the nature of the affiliate-led type organization, and this isn't uncommon to big global organizations like ourselves, that even that was out of kilter with who we wanted to be. So I was quite involved in a global governance change process, which delivered an independent or a part independent board. So now we have an independent chair who's not a member of any of our affiliate boards. We have and a number of others, all from the Global South, who bring extraordinary levels of expertise and experience across human rights development, humanitarian work, and then coupled with some nominated affiliate membership. And it's quite a small board, it's only a board of 9 or 10. And that is now our guiding light in terms of our global governance. It doesn't mean that we as affiliates don't come together as we need to and as we have to in terms of making key decisions. But that transformation was an important signal, not just a signal, but it started as it also is a signal to ourselves and the rest of the world that we're very serious about this, and that the leadership has to come from the South. The leadership has to, also have that widespread and have that sense of balance. And then from a more practical point of view, sure, of course, it makes sense to have the people who know more than any of us do about the work at the table making the decisions, and ensure that you and Melissa's talked about the voice of lived experience, and that we can always be held to account to ensure that our partnerships are equitable, they're genuine, they're not contractual partnerships, they're not purely funding-based partnerships, they're actual partnerships where we are genuinely listening and engaging and changing as a result of what our partners are telling us and what they need. They know more than any of us about what needs to be done. And I think this is, I think it's a vital piece of work for our entire sector to be doing. If we're to continue to be legitimate, if we're continue to have public support, but more importantly, if we're going to continue to have the kind of impact that we want to have, if we don't ensure that we transform who we are, the way we do things, who we listen to, who makes decisions, then in actual fact we'll become redundant, because others will do it, and others will do it better, and local organizations, and we have partners who are very sizable very legitimate, strong organizations in their own right. They don't need us, Oxfam. We're very lucky to have them as partners. But unless it's an equal partnership, why would they bother, and why should they? So I think this transformation that we need to make is, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it also is an essential thing to do if we're going to have the impact that we want to have. And this idea, and sorry, we hate the charity word, and I know a lot of us around this table do as well, but we have to use it because we're in the. But even the transformation of thinking that this is about a rights-based approach to development. This is about ensuring that people have an opportunity to realize the same rights that we all have. And so we happen to have a model whereby, there are funds that need to be generated and shared, but it's not it can't be seen to be done from a north-south perspective. It's our collective resource that we need to look at how best to invest it and what change it can deliver, and how do we make the decisions collectively around that. And from the Irish perspective, because we've been in a parallel journey. I mean, I did say in my first few months in this job, I did tell my then board that, you probably all need to be going, which is a very precarious thing to say when you're in your probation period. So be careful. But I mean, in terms of ensuring that we had a diversity of voice at the table, we've always had a gender balance, but that was something obvious. One thing I introduced early on was advertising for board members. So we publicly advertise, and have done for many years. And it is, first of all, it's an exercise in transparency and accountability to the wider public, but it also, it encourages a whole wide range of people that you may never have come across. And it's important to us to have a board that is diverse, and I don't mean superficially diverse. I mean actual diverse thinking, as well as people coming from different backgrounds and different areas of work and so on, that continue to challenge what we're doing and continue to challenge how we're doing it, and there's a kind of magic when this comes together. Now it's it presents its own challenges too, but it certainly avoids the groupthink that we're all afraid of, or we should be afraid of. So a lot of change has happened over this period, but we need to continue. We need to continue driving it, and we've certainly at our country level. I had a meeting of we had a global gathering, which is a meeting of all of our country directors and all of our executive boards, so over 100 people. I would safely say 90% are local leaders. So that's the distance we've come. Now, we still believe we have a distance to go in terms of the way we globally manage things, and I think there are lots of accountability issues in terms of fund flows and all those kind of things, those big questions that we have to work on. But I do feel we've come quite a distance, and it's been, it's not been easy. It's been a challenging journey, and people have had to give up things, which is always hard for any of us. But it's really important in order to share, in order to, and I think we're a better organization. I know we're a better organization because of it, but we're not perfect, and we still have a long way to go.
Great, thanks for that, Jim, because it really highlights that the change that needs to happen again at all levels. I think it's interesting what you mentioned there about the at an international secretariat level, that the chairperson not only is, you're looking at more diversity on the board, but also independence on the board as well. So to get out of that risk really of kind of groupthink, or kind of really propagating the same kind of ideas amongst the same group of people, but ensuring that you're bringing in that rich kind of diversity of perspective as well. I'd like to go on to McKenna now. So McKenna has, you're joining us from Kenya, and where you've had over 30 years experience in the civil society sector. And you're a board member of ActionAid Ireland. And so it would be really, you've also sat on a number of international boards. So it would be great if you could kind of give us your perspective, both from having sat on a number of boards, where you think some of the challenges are, and how, like, what really made the difference, not only for you, but what you saw with other board members and bringing in other members from the Global South to the board of ActionAid Ireland, but also in other organisations, and any kind of recommendations you would have for this group in terms of how you can really build, that diversity within their boards as well. That'd be really welcome.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you to my chair, Anne Lee, for recommending that I join this panel. It's an amazing journey, and I just love what Marissa and Jim have talked about, because we've come a long way. Because, like I've said, I served in the humanitarian standards board before. I'm currently also serving in Hope and Homes International Board, and I would like to put the context first in saying that I think we also have a framework which is called the ESG, the Environmental, Social and Governance Framework, which is actually trying to hold all institutions to account in terms of the principles, some of the principles, if we look at the governance part of it, in terms of embracing diversities of board directors, and also embracing the corporate transparency in terms of decision making. And I like what my previous speakers have said in terms of power that board members hold. But I just want to say the things that I've seen change. For example, I'm in my second term with the Irish board, and I think before joining the international board, the tensions which were there were quite felt when the first discussions in terms of South members joining. And for example, when you join a board, and a board is made of individual directors, and so if in particular individual directors had not embraced the southern concept of having members from the south join, you could tell a subtle resistant, or even if I use the word silent racism in terms of what would this be bringing. But I think things have changed, because the global is becoming a very nobody actually would survive without the interconnectivity that we have, either virtually or in person. So when I joined the Irish board 3 years ago, it was during the COVID time, and this is the first time I was doing virtual meeting versus the in-person meetings. And I think the interesting, and what I really appreciate about the ActionAid board currently is, out of the number we are 3 of us from the south, and I think the diversity of the continent, all the way from South Americas and Africa. It's interesting, because one of the things that I've experienced very positively is a board that knows what it wants, and so it's purposing in terms of the kind of skills they looked for. For example, when I had the interview for being approached, was, we know you're strong in ABC, and this is what we are looking for. So I think that has also made my experience in the board are very positive, in terms of feeling confident that I can contribute to the topic that I speak for with passion and joy. And like I was sharing earlier on, and this is in terms of women rights, and particularly ActionAid Ireland has a very strong program on women rights, and therefore my coming in with a purpose. So it's not like tick a box, but it's a purpose of putting context on the table for the board in terms of ease of decision making, and I think that has worked well. I think, like everybody has said, is work in progress, and yes, I do agree that the feminist leadership is one of the things that boards need to adopt, because this is where we all become conscious of the power that our position hold, in terms of the collaboration and partnership that we are talking about, in terms of equal partnership, in terms of how then do we also use the information that we have transparently. And I'm saying this has been very positive for me, including serving in the subcommittees. And the subcommittee for me has actually been a generation of learning. It's where we have more time to dissect the issues and kind of putting my perspectives on that, depending on what the issue we are dealing with. And so I don't feel a stranger in the space, but I feel that the board is progressive in terms of adapting, embracing not just the inclusion. And I think the last 2 weeks, we also discussed about diversity, not just from the South, but also from within Ireland itself. So, and this is why I'm laughing because and smiling, I'm saying coming from some of the experiences where I go for a meeting and somebody says, okay, this is the strategy we have for humanitarian response for Africa. Honestly speaking, Africa as a continent, you cannot apply the same context. And this is why then you have the Southern coming in with the context of the reality of saying, even McKenna coming from Kenya alone, the northern part of Kenya and the southern part strategies would be different. And I think this is where we start recognizing then how we put our expertise from the north and the south together. I just also wanted to say that no society can exist on its own purely social extraction anymore. And so I would really encourage board to think about, you know, in terms of the reality, what is the niche, what is the expertise that they're looking for, because this is what has worked for me in terms of being able to serve. I don't feel shy because I'm contributing to what I know. We also avoid then working from the blind spots because we are, you know, engaging. And I think one of the best things that have happened for me in the boards that I have joined is a proper induction that has worked very well, and that transition in terms of understanding the vision, the mission, the principles and values that the boards stands for. And again, the other bit about it is if the chairperson who is leading is aware of a southern part in the board and calling you in terms of, you know, you feel the value addition, because sometimes we shy, as I move to my next point in terms of the barriers. It's language is one of the barrier, because if English is not your basic language, for example, one of our board members is from South Americas, and English is a language on itself. So we need to be conscious about it, because then sometimes you will keep on saying, I don't understand, I don't, and therefore you get discouraged because all the time it's like, could you repeat and that. So we need to be careful and also conscious about the language. And some of the things that we do for language is also some of us speaking slower than we do, and kind of paraphrasing. That's one of the barriers. I think the next barrier that I see and discuss is also the financial implications. If we were to do physical meetings, we are blessed. COVID brought in the new way of doing things virtual. Implication of flying members from the south to the north, and the vis of that is also constraining. I think the other bit is technology, because not all of us are close to technology. For example, we might have an excellent woman who comes from the northern part of Kenya, but because she cannot afford to buy the internet bundles and all that stuff, then she's disadvantaged from the digital technology in the areas if we were to use that. The other bit is also time zones, because sometimes like our friend is, I think, 5 hours behind, then you're 5 hours. So it's always got to be a balance in terms of that. So those are some of the barriers, and definitely culture, because I smile because when I look at the education systems of the North and South, you talk about Africa, Asia, our education system is so, the way we know things, we need to be very open-minded so that we take culture as rich rather than as the negative, so that we do not find ourselves in unnecessary tensions because of the beliefs that we have, because sometimes we come with history into board meetings, and that could also cause tensions dependingly. And I think diversity for me also helps a lot in decision making, sound decision makings. We need to be aware and invest in just kind of the process of that. So in terms of recommendation and in recruitment, let it not be tokenistic. Let the board be clear in terms of the expertise they're looking for, the value addition in terms of content. Let's also look in terms of balancing the calendars. It's not just the southern people to adjust their timings so that we are not having board meetings at 12 midnight, because that's how it can work. just practicing that language is power, but also practicing that we can speak slowly, or we can understand how the other person does communicate. Having open minds in terms of how we want to understand how development issues are affecting the world from the perspective of the shoe that hurts most. I think that's critical, because that is where power analysis needs to be done. And finally, I think each board needs to have policies of inclusion and diversity to be in place, embraced by all members, but also not just for the part of the theory, but for the part of being held accountable in terms of upholding what is in paper and practice. So maybe let me stop there.
Thanks very much, McKenna, for that. Some great insights, and particularly some great tips as well. We might bring in the other panel members here now, and I'd like to give everybody who is on this call the opportunity to either put questions into the chat, but also if you'd like to raise your hand as well and come in, and that could be either for a comment or a question as well. But I think one thing that's I suppose a common theme that's coming across all four speakers is really, or including myself, but all three speakers, is around that it is going to be a challenging and difficult transition, and it's not something that comes easy. I think, as you mentioned, Jim, it requires a shift from some of the board members in their thinking. What as board members or as boards are they willing to give up or do in order to ensure that there is a more diverse board in place? But also, as you mentioned, McKenna, some of the very practical things that are required of all board members when you do have meetings, in order to actually ensure that you can get that level of participation, get that level of engagement, and make sure that they are all that people are actually able to and have the opportunity to bring something to the table, to showcase their skills and to add value to the board as well. Holly, can I ask, can you spotlight all the speakers, please, so we can have that? So I know there's a question here around bringing for TROCRA, so just around the African Board Search Organization that you have used. Would you mind speaking a little bit about that, just for some that are looking for some recommendations? Thank you.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to actually post some of the details into the chat as well. So we've used various organizations, from Board Match to the Africa Boardroom. We've gone through the Dóchas Wednesday newsletter as well, used our channels on LinkedIn. So it is a multi-pronged approach. It's we try not to narrow it. And this is a shift from the way boards operated previously. Use your network, get out there. It's who you know, it's who you've gone in contact with, and you have an affinity towards this person, or you can see how their skill set could. But it's talk about narrow. It's on the island of Ireland, and you're looking at this narrow pool of talent that hasn't necessarily got the perspective of the global South. And then narrowing it even further, finding a South African that does diversity, equity, and inclusion to come and join your board that's sitting in Ireland. That's, like a needle in a haystack. So it is about diversifying that pipeline and looking at different ways of attracting talent. But it actually starts primarily with, what are you looking for? And it's back to McKenna's point around, when you're on a board, what you want to be is useful. You want to be able to contribute. You want to be able to feel that your voice has power, has weight, and that you're valued as a board member. And that starts with your skills gaps. your job description, your role descriptions, and being very clear as a board, as a committee, as to what the role of this individual is. Because when it comes to the board meetings, then you know who to tap on, you know who to call on. Now, there's McKenna, you were absolutely, I will say, I'm going to call it out, absolutely brilliant synopsis of those challenges, of the things that we need to think about. And there's a lot there, and different boards are going to need different things from that laundry list. I'm going to give you a really simple starting point. And it's something that we discussed recently in our board meeting around tapping into that diversity of thought. And I'm going to ask you to accept this challenge within your own board. When you think about actually how do I access, how do I understand the diversity of thought within my board? What does that mean? How can I go about it? It's really important to pick up the phone outside of board meetings and have the conversation and get to know each other. Get to know each other beyond necessarily the board itself. Yes, those skill sets are important. Motivations are important as well. Why are you doing what you're doing? Where is that passion stemming from? And you will open yourself up to a world of knowledge and understanding and perspective. So all of those things that McKenna touched on and Jim touched on, and the challenges that you face, that we face as board members around time difference, around speaking fast and speaking slow, around those little idiosyncrasies and little unseen power dynamics, inside or outside dynamics that happen, that can really be ironed out in those kinds of conversations. Not only are you ironing that out, you're also creating psychological safety, because now McKenna doesn't know Melissa, board member D&I specialism, but she knows Melissa, whose motivations are around a focus on human rights, specifically when it comes to race and cultural inclusion. And that brings the humanity back into the boardroom. And it brings us back to our purpose as these important organizations that drive social change. And you start at the heart of it in the boardroom.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Because I think it's looking at kind of what are some of the conditions that you can put in place to enable people to succeed as a board member as well. That is really important, because it's really feeds into what they could do in order to bring their skill set to the fore and to ensure that they're able to contribute at a level that where they have that psychological safety as well, as you mentioned. I'm not sure, Jim, if you want to come in on that.
Yeah, look, I think that was great, Melissa, because I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we connect at a human level. Of course, we connect at policy level and all the other kind of things one has to manage at a board level, but we connect at a human level, and we care deeply about the issues that and in our sector more than most, I would say, because the challenge is so big, and it's so important. The work is so important across all organizations represented. So we, having a really good understanding of what motivates, what makes the person tick, why would they have decided to choose this area? They didn't arrive here by accident. They arrived here because of something deep within themselves. And I think that's really, really important. And we do try to create as much space as possible for that interaction, for that human connection. Other thing that I might have mentioned or should have mentioned was we purposefully bring board members to visit program work as often as possible. We try to do it once every 2 years or so. And it's a cost, of course, but there is nothing like meeting the people that you work with, understanding, walking beside them, seeing them in the, spending that, and vice versa, people coming to us from across our program work, and just having that, again, that human connection. I mean, what I believe is that the issues and struggles and challenges that we are working on across the global south, and we're talking about the global south, I suppose, for the purpose of this, are universal issues. They just manifest differently, whether it be women's rights, whether it be inequality, whether it be, disability inclusion. These issues are global issues, but they manifest differently. So we can connect at all of those kinds of levels, but also to remember that, and I think this should be obvious, but in case it's not, we don't have the solutions. The solutions are always going to be found locally, and it isn't a one-way channel. The amount of learning that, and I say this 100% genuinely, that I continue to get from my colleagues across the world every time I encounter them, and they're the things that I bring back into my work here and say, this is the way they're doing it in South Africa. Why the hell haven't we thought about doing it like this? This is the culture shift that we need to make. Why aren't we? What are we doing about it here? And but I think one thing that's really important within this, and it's already been touched on, but it's ensuring that the culture of the board, and which trickles then all the way through the organization, and the culture of the senior teams and so on, is consistent with this, and challenging it. So creating a safe space, and we've been involved in deliberative cultural change, to call out, in a way that's appropriate, in a way that allows space, issues and ways of doing things that need to change, and that everybody within the organization, and this throughout the structures of the organization, feels comfortable and safe to do that, and to bring it to board, and to bring it to somebody like me, and again, that that sense of collective ownership. It isn't that lot up there at the board, or this fella over here, or this woman over here who runs the thing. It's everybody's responsibility, and everybody has an opportunity to make the change happen, and to influence it in a positive way.
Great, thanks, Jim. There's a couple of very practical questions, McKenna, I might come to you on. You put in, just to speak, if you'd like, just a little bit around some of the networks that you mentioned, and the importance of plugging into networks in the Global South in terms of perhaps recruiting trustees, but also a very practical question around arranging meetings. We've spoken of the importance of that personal connection, of, perhaps picking up the phone individually amongst board members, getting to know the individuals. And I think it's really around, how do you balance the kind of virtual world, the distance, I think all of our carbon footprint, with trying to create that personal connection. And do you think it's important that there is time set aside for the board to come together in person? And how often do you think that should happen as well?
I think I believe in relationships. I think the way things get to move is the more we understand each other, the more we are able to communicate and kind of deliver together as a team. And so those calls, as Marissa is saying, are very critical. And I think this is how I have managed to be in the Irish board for the second term, because when the chair said, would you like to join? At that time, I wasn't sure. A second time, I wasn't sure if my contribution was really that great for me to be given the opportunity for the second term, because that is what she does. Is like, she'll either do an email and say, do you have a time, and that kind of thing. So I think that is a great way of making human, because I mean that's how. Because if it's about about language, then it's even easier when it's two of you kind of getting to the point. And that's why I went back to say, I find the subcommittees a great way of kind of creating even deeper relationships. Recently, we had a board reflection session, and the challenge we had, the people that were in Dublin were able to do the face-to-face group work and those of us who are online missed out in the rich discussion. So they missed out on our rich discussion. They reached out, we missed out on their rich discussion. And so those are the dynamisms that we should think about in terms of is it necessary to have a face-to-face? I think the answer is yes, but it needs planning because it takes resources and money. And so it can also be strategic. I think Jim said that board members do go out to the field and something like that. So it takes intentional planning for it to happen, because personally, I'm a people person. So I believe when people meet face-to-face, and I can give a good example is in the current institution where I am, we had such a difficult time with the headquarters, which is in Copenhagen, but we purposed for the leadership from the two institutions to have a face-to-face. Yes, it's costed money, but it opened the strategic doors for fundraising, for thinking together and that. So it's where you say, literal input, high impact, if we want to think like that. So those are some of the things that we would like to think about. In terms of the networks, I may not mention all of them here, because that again will be context to context, it'll be country to country. So in terms of that, so if it's the humanitarian, then there are the humanitarian networks. If it's the women rights, there are the women rights networks. It's also nice to do context, because then if the board is clear, they're looking for a strategic thinker, then I think there are think tanks that we know about we can reach, or if it is about humanitarian, then we know we can even touch base with the co-humanitarian website, if it's in the south or north. So I think that's for me what works. And then when I make a new friend, I make that becomes a capital. That's what I told today. I said networks are social capitals. I make a new friend today, Jim becomes my friend, because I can always send terms of reference to Jim and say, look here, we are looking for somebody of this nature. What do you think? Because now I've learned what his area is. So it's us building this network that works for everybody else together.
Great, thank you so much for that, McKenna. Some really good insights there. So before I ask all the panels, panel members, just to give their final word or takeaway, I just want to mention a few kind of takeaways that I've taken on, particularly some of the practical pieces that you're implementing. So the idea really of bringing people on board, perhaps in subcommittees, familiarizing them with the organization, with the board structure, bringing them on board through that channel, or indeed through board apprentices, as you are trialing at the moment in Trócaire. But also ensuring that there is a proper induction in place, and that there is a clear spec of the skills that you want, what you would like that board member to add and contribute to the board. And being very specific with regards to that. But of course, as you mentioned, McKenna, kind of very eloquently there, around the importance of relationships and building relationships, building out your own organizational network, your personal network, and drawing on those connections to really attract the right people to your mission, to your mandate as well. So with that, we are going to wrap up, but I would like to go first to each panel member, perhaps just to suggest perhaps what you would ask each of the participants here to take away and to consider going forward with regards to recruiting members from the Global South onto their board. I might start with you, Jim, perhaps, and then I'll go around.
Sure, thanks, Jane, and thanks everybody, and again for having me here. It's been a really lovely occasion, and I think I'm learning a lot from listening to my panelists colleagues. I think get on with it. If you're not already there, you need to get there, and I don't think you need to be afraid. I mean, change is always makes people nervous, but it's all, if you do it right, it's really great, and it'll transform, and we need that transformation. But just be cautious not to do this in a tokenistic way. It'll cause more damage than good. and you'll be terribly exposed, and it won't help. So just go at this in a meaningful way, as you've described. Make sure you're clear on the skill set that you want, the rationale for the role that you want to create, or roles, hopefully, and then reach out to those of us who are in those spaces. If you need some support, there are more than enough people out there who would be delighted to participate in boards, if the board is ready for them, if the organization is ready for them. So get your organization ready for this. If you haven't got there, make sure you're having those challenging conversations. Bring in people like people who are on this call, maybe, to talk to boards if useful, if they're not quite there yet. Don't. This is a really positive development. See it as a big leap forward and a positive transformation in where you're going. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Might go to you, Melissa, for your key takeaway for
Sure. So my key takeaways, I would say, fight the fear. Nothing that you're going to do is going to be a big enough challenge not to do it. And it's just overcoming those awkward conversations that you have, the thoughts that you have in your mind around how do I navigate this through healthy dialogue. Have good conversations. Recognize the humanity in this, and recognize as well the privilege. And that goes always, both ways, cross-culturally, interculturally. We all have something to learn from each other. And this is how we build better boards, but we also build better working worlds, better communities. So I'm going to ask everyone in this call, my door is always open, so please do connect, but channel the principles of Ubuntu in what you're doing. Really think about the fact that whoever's on your board is part of your community, and this is how we learn and we grow together.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And McKenna, lastly but not least.
So just to say thanks once again for having me on the panel, and sorry, I was just saying thank you for having me on the panel. And I think what I'm going to say is there's nothing to be afraid about. Change starts with a small step. I think we have already started the steps, and we are willing to share our experiences. If we are going to make the world a better place, fighting the inequalities, the gender equalities, and just making that the world is safe for all, we cannot avoid not to become a once more global world. And that's why I was saying that my take would really also want people to understand that when we say feminist leadership is what is going to help us to get there, because it will help us in terms of sharing power. It will help us in dismantling our own biases, in talking about inclusion. How do we become responsible as charities in terms of our use of own power? How do we collaboratively become accountable? And I think it will make us become a better world. So that's my take, and there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just that we get opportunities for both the North and South to understand each other as a connected world. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we are just at the end of the session now, but I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our three panelists. I know there's a lot of good words there in the chat, but I think it's great to hear that those who joined us today really found it a very thought-provoking session. So thank you for your own preparation and for joining us. And what I would say is that we have recorded this session, and we will put it up on our website. So please do share with any colleagues or other board members that you think would be useful, because I think it was a very good session to capture not only some of the wider issues, but perhaps also some of the practical tips and recommendations that you can do to encourage more members or people from the Global South onto your own boards as well. So thank you very much, and I will for joining us today, and hopefully I'll see many of you soon again. But thank you.